4 years ago, I stood in the 18th tee needing birdie to qualify for the Open Championship at Royal St George's. My heart was pounding, hands were shaking, I could honestly barely breathe. I'd hit great tee shots thousands of times before, but this moment felt different. Pressure honestly hit me like a wall. What I did next changed how I handled pressure on the course forever, and I've used the same method ever since. I'm going to show you how I turned pressure into performance and my top tips to help you do the same. This epiphany didn't come out of nowhere. Just a few weeks earlier, I completely fell apart in a tournament where the pressure got the best out of me. I take you to the Amateur Championship, one of the biggest and most prestigious amateur events in the world. And that year is being played at Nairn Golf Club in the north of Scotland, very near to home for me. I went with high hopes. Little did I know this would be one of the poorest performances of my entire amateur career. The Amateur Championship is played as 2 rounds of qualifying in a field of 268 players, where the top 64 in ties progress through to the match play after the first 2 rounds, where it's straight knockout. The course was set up brutally. The rough was incredibly high, fairways are narrow, and the winds were gusting. It was gusting up to above 40 miles an hour, so super strong winds. With conditions being so tough, I knew I'd need my A game to compete this week. And I vividly remember standing in the first tee, feeling unbelievably nervous, super nervous. The event was really important and I really wanted to play well. I'd put a lot of emphasis on preparing for it thoroughly. And I can't ever forget how uncomfortable I felt in the first tee shot. I was standing on there and I literally felt as if you'd thrown a rock at me, I would have just broken apart. I was so incredibly rigid. The wind was howling into my face. It's about a 440-yard par 4, playing super long. Reasonably narrow tee shot, bunker on the right, the beach way right. And I stood in that tee and I hit driver so far right, literally off the planet right. It barely missed the beach. It was just in play in the right rough and it was super short. I was hitting I think I hit a 3-iron or 3 wood into the green, something like way back. And from that moment, I knew the event was going to be a struggle. It didn't get any easier after the first tee shot and I went round in rounds of 87 and 83. Around a very tough course in very tough conditions. And 2 of the worst rounds I've ever really played. At the time, I was playing off a +6 handicap. I was a very accomplished player. I played a lot of international level golf. So this, at the time for me, was a very poor score and I was absolutely distraught. It was honestly a complete collapse of my golf game. And right afterwards, I genuinely considered just hanging up the clubs for good. But thankfully, I didn't. I had a good think about what actually went wrong there. Now, there was obviously some pretty poor golf and poor decisions being made from a technical standpoint, but a big crux of the issue for me in that event was that I handled my nerves really badly. You're always going to feel nerves, but how you choose to handle them is really important. So over the next 2 weeks, I did a lot of work and reflection on how I could improve that. I realized I needed to improve at 3 main things in order to handle nerves better in that scenario: visualization, breathing, fluidity. I had 2 weeks to prep for Open Championship qualifying, where I was at St Anselm Links to try and qualify for the Open at Royal St George's that year. I also had an amateur event a week before, the oldest amateur event in the world, the Tennant Cup at Glasgow Gales Golf Club in the Killamant. A wonderful event. So I spent a week working on my pre-shot routine, working on those 3 pieces. I went to Glasgow Gales for the Tennant Cup and I performed wonderfully. I actually shot a course record that year in the first round. I finished 3rd at the overall event. This is held over 3 rounds, the first being regional qualifying, where the top 20 players out of a field around 100, I believe it's actually top 10 players now, qualify for final qualifying. So I went to St Anselm Links, I shot 5 under par in the regional qualifier, I finished 2nd and moved through to final qualifying. At final qualifying, I played some of the best golf I've probably ever played, over 2 rounds in a field of around 100 again, where the top 3 players qualify for the Open Championship that year at Royal St George's. I was 8 under par for the 2 rounds, standing on the last tee. And at the time, the top 3 qualify, and 3rd place was sitting at 8 under par. So I needed to get to 9 to be outright 3rd to qualify for the Open Championship. The last hole at Royal St Anne's is a long par 5, around 540 yards, with bunkers right in the middle of the fairway, only about 20 yards between them, and rough, heavy rough either side. So you really need to hit a quality tee shot to be able to have a go at the green in 2. I put into practice all of the 3 principles I've worked on over the past couple of weeks: breath work, visualization, and fluidity. and I managed to hit a wonderful tee shot, a wonderful second shot, narrowly missed out for an eagle and tapped in for birdie. Unfortunately, in the end, I ended up not qualifying because one of the guys in the group behind actually birdied his last 3 holes to knock us out. But it was a wonderful experience, and I was delighted to be able to perform at that level, given that I was in the absolute doldrums 2 weeks before and nearly giving up golf. So let's talk about what I actually did to turn my game around and how you can do exactly the same using those 3 key principles to transform your game. So first up, we've got visualization. So before hitting every single shot, I was incredibly determined to make sure I actually saw what I wanted to do. I got in a bad habit not doing that. So prior to hitting every single shot, I would stand directly behind the ball, watching right down the target line and trying to imagine in my head the ball flight I want to see. Normally it'd be pretty neutral, not much curvature, reasonably straight, right down my target line. And I tried to imagine it finishing right by the hole or right down the fairway, wherever I want to hit it. I really ingrained that image in my mind. This bunker was definitely not raked before me, by the way. Our next most important piece was breath work. So I noticed that when I was feeling under a lot of pressure, I would tend to stand over the ball and have really short, quick breaths. And research has shown that if you can have deeper, longer breaths, you flood your system with more oxygen, and this helps calm you down. It slows your heart rate down. It makes you feel much more relaxed. And that was a big goal for me when I did feel under pressure, was to try and actually not feel quite so tense. So having big, deep breaths before I hit every single shot. So I'd try and count in for 3 and out for 3. Big, deep, long, slow breaths. I do that throughout my pre-shot routine. So prior to walking into it and hitting the ball, going through that really, really helped stabilize me and make me feel a little bit more comfortable, regardless of the situation. Finally, we had the most important part, fluidity. Without this, everything else crumbled. Ooh, that was an inside door. I found that even if I did visualize a wonderful shot, even if I did do these deep, slow breaths that would help me relax, I would still tense up over the ball when I felt under pressure. I would still stand there, feel super rigid, all my muscles would get really tense, and I would tend to hit a pretty bad shot. For me, I'd always tend to hold the face open because I wouldn't actually let my hands and arms be a bit softer and close it down, and I'd end up wafting it way out to the right. That's always been my bad shot. I started looking at a lot of top players and what they actually do before they hit a golf ball, in the moments right before. Dustin Johnson is a great example of this, by the way. And you'll see that just before they hit the ball, they have loads of tiny little movements. They're not still. Nothing is tense, rigid, or not moving. They're constantly moving. Lots of tiny little movements. Now, it's not always massive shifts or massive twists. It can sometimes be tiny, minuscule movements, such as the tapping of a golf club. Just ever so small little motions with the club against the ground here, or moving their weight from foot to foot. These subtle movements help stop us from tensing up and becoming very rigid. Golf is an athletic motion. It's like throwing a basketball. If you're going to throw a basketball, you're not going to stand there for a minute without moving and then suddenly chuck it at the net. You're going to be quite fluid. You're running into it, you then take your shot. Whereas with golf, because we've got more time, a lot of the time we tend to be very tense and we stop moving. So I always encourage players to be super fluid. And this is something I worked on that helped me tremendously. I honestly can't tell you how much it helped me. So over the ball, I would make sure before I hit it, as I'm looking at the target, I'm constantly making tiny little movements. And then I have my last look at the target, I look down at the ball and I pull the trigger. This helped to make the golf swing feel way more athletic, and I found it made an incredible difference for me when I started to feel nervous. Because every time I feel nervous, I tense up, I stop moving. So tiny little movements keep me fluid and help me relax so that I can actually make the golf swing a bit more of an athletic motion instead of it being a stab and jerk at the golf ball to try and make some kind of contact. Becoming ice cold under pressure doesn't have to be complicated. If you can have a robust system where you visualize a wonderful shot before you hit it, you have deep breathing all the way through your pre-shot routine, and then you have tiny little movements to keep yourself fluid prior to hitting a golf ball, you will find it incredibly easy to handle those nerves. Try all of this next time you're on the course and see if you can bring it into your monthly medal. See if you can just handle the pressure a little bit better, and it's going to make a wonderful difference to your scoring. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe so you never miss a free lesson. I put them out every single week. And check out the description for free coaching and training to help you play better golf. If you want to learn about more simple scoring skills you can take straight to the course to help you shoot better scores, then check out this video and have an incredible day.